honestly, if I was claiming I'm a game developer with 20 years of experience, this would be embarrassing to have online. Let's take a look at what's really wrong about this, and I don't even need to be a game dev to understand that.
So here is my issue. This guy is saying I don't need to be a game dev to understand this issue. Oh, look at that. Example of creating stuff. But none of those things are actually things that you should consider as bad practices. Because if you know what function you're talking about, and you're not some fucking dumbass who just says, oh, those are a lot of numbers, numbers equal bad. This is my main criticism here. Let's move on.
Right? Imagine we have a car object, and I create the car object by passing in 96.
Okay, and this is my favorite example. This is exactly what happens here. And yes, this is perfectly fine. Maybe replace those falses with the thing they are representing. But those two, representing horsepower and number of doors, you want me to wrap those in classes. We are wrapping those things in classes so that we have a justification to write a class type constructor in the function call, which adds overhead to our functions and is adding nothing to the code just to make pretend like we are more readable, even though when we do this, we just hover here and we can see the signature. So let me see like the example here. Everyone can understand that this is awful. This is dog shit. Because you have a block of lines that mean nothing. Hovering over here shows you that this is the name of the parameter in the function call itself is horsepower. Here is number of doors. Here is the is automatic boolean. And here it is the is electric. Now, I would change those two to enums because I might want to expand those. But why would I change horsepower and number of door ever? Is there any time where number of doors might not be a number? So this is one of his example, and there is this other example that he gave. This, oh, I'm just like, I would be fired if I did something that stupid. I would have been fired if I gave this code in my job. I'm not joking. Adding a wrapper class to a simple number when you hover over this thing, and now this function needs to receive this stupid class, or you have a stupid class that has a convert to int, so you convert it to the class, then you convert it to int back, and you add a stupid amount of overhead, and you're not guaranteed that this thing would be optimized away in release mode. Not only that, when you want to debug your code later, whenever you enter this constructor, it would first enter all of those needless classes and their constructors, then enter their integer conversion back and all of those other function calls, and your debugging would become bogged down by stupid amounts of stupid variables that pass through stupid classes, and it would just take forever. Those things, I would make sure that I know that those are enum. So much overhead, so much needless nonsense that just over verbosity for something you can just hover. So once we compare those two, if we add the signature above, this suddenly becomes very stupid. So let's move on.
What is that? What are those alarms? Is it an alarm for person A, an alarm for whatever character, an alarm to do what? It's unexpressive. Really spaghetti code, in my opinion.
And I agree as well. Those numbers here should be enumerated. You should use an enum to define them. If I have this many alarms and I know what those alarms do because I replace those stupid numbers with an actual enum value so I can actually tell what each alarm is responsible for, I might want to set them off manually. And I might want to know which alarms I'm setting off each time I'm setting them off. Or maybe this is just setting all alarms to 0, in which case, yes, a for loop would be amazing, but with 6 alarms, the difference between making a for loop and just copy pasting it is really, this is a nothing burger. The problem here is not the list of alarms. The main problem here is those magic numbers. Also, by the documentation, this is the incorrect way. I just remembered, which means that if you set an alarm to 1 in the begin step event, it would run at the same frame. So if you want to force an alarm to run, you are setting it to 1, not to 0. And if you want to, if you want to invoke it, you set it to 1. If you want it to stop, you set it to -1. As you see, it should be noted that an alarm is not finished when it reaches 0, although the event has been triggered. So this is another thing that this guy didn't get because of a very important thing of he didn't read the documentation before making his comments. You need to know what you're talking about when you try to say something about someone else's code. Because if you have no idea what you're doing, then this happens and you're like, oh, it is setting them to 0. This is something we did in like C programming. Like we were lazy and like instead of 0 and instead of true and false, like making the defines for true and false was annoying. So we just did 0. We just did 0 and 1. Heck, to convert any positive number, any like non-zero number to 1, we did this. We did this, and this converts all non-zero numbers to 1. If you want to check against 0 or 1 in your code and you have integers, this is what we did in C programming. It is stupid, but if it works, is it really stupid? Also, if you're only evaluating against 0, then there is no difference. If you're saying question asked is not 0 or question asked is 0, 0 evaluating against 0 or against false is the same, because I want to have the option to expand into something else that is not just 0 and 1, but also add extra types of events for this question asked check. As I said, error messages or like a callback to some default because I couldn't find those things in file. Like all of the stuff that is like I didn't expect it, but I want to have this one value still hold all of the information I need to handle questions. I would use an integer. I wouldn't use a boolean.
In theory, that should be true because anything other than 0 is true, but why even allow somebody to write code that can potentially be that confusing? It's just a no-go. Another thing here that I noticed is the absurd amount of comments.
Yeah, that is something that I can understand. There is like a lot of comments here that do a lot of stupid things that are just self-explanatory. But this type of commenting is something I have seen in corporations. And maybe you're just tired and you want to be reminded of something before you go to sleep and you're like half asleep, so you add a comment to every stuff that you do, or that you add a comment for something that you want to do in the future. So you write a list of comments and I just add comments for what I want to do without actually coding. I just make like the flow of the program. And then I start making it. I do function and so on. This is Notepad. This is not Notepad++. So like you end up with this type of code when you start with the flow comments, the comments that describe the flow of the function. And then you have like a bunch of comments every line of code, and all of them just do this. It is caused either by some corporate practice, which is something that I remember from my own job. Actual practices that forced you to add a comment on every line unless that line is so obvious that an intern would understand it. Those are flow control comments most of the time, or some comments that are added due to company policies. In this case, it is clear to see that those are flow control comments. I can almost guarantee those comments predate the code. And this is how you approach stuff. This is a trick I would suggest newbies to do. I would suggest interns to write that type of comment. The flow control comments is something I would tell interns to actually do, because then I can actually go over their code with them and be like, okay, you wrote here you want to do this. Does this line of code actually do what you wanted it? And then if everything does what it wanted, what the intern wanted the lines to do, and the code still doesn't work, you can explain to them that, okay, this means that you have a problem with the flow. Like you wrote an amazing like comments for everything, but your flow sucks. So your flow doesn't do what you think it does. And then you can actually start to explain to them stuff, and they actually understand, because every line is both human text and computer text, which is something that is very difficult for interns to understand, for newer programmers. They don't get this line. This is why you have comments. This is why comments are important. Comments are important because comments are written in human language, and not everyone is that familiar with code. Like, this is a W. Why is this an L? Like, this is an L. This is an L. This is an L. This is an L. Those are W's. I would never shit on anyone who does line by line comments on code, especially when I see that they are struggling with making actually good code. First thing first, as I said, global.storyline array. This part of the code is good because this is how we represent stuff in actual code. Do I have to open up some fucking dumbass Visual Studio project? A vertex array, vertex buffer, element buffer. What is buffer? Buffer is an array. Vertex buffer. All of the vertices for your entire game are stored inside an array. Oh, look at this. Vertices inside a massive array for all the points. For all the string vertices also in a different array. Why? Because when I render them like this. And when I update, I just pass the endpoint with the vertices amount. And I update data in M buttons using like in the button renderer with this. All of the things that I need are updated through those arrays. And now, yes, this is an array of 1, But if I want to add more points, all I do is add like this, and suddenly I have millions of points. Same with the strings. I have 200 characters supported in the string. So all of this can function however the fuck I want. And all of this works because everything is stored in arrays. So I don't have 17 different draw calls because I want to render all of those characters. We do represent Shelly as like one. But instead of writing comment Shelly and then one, we have an enum making like, I don't know, like a character underscore Shelly. We actually do it like that. Actual enum for those things in this core mod, I think. Yeah. Enum tiles. I need to write this code in a way that is clear for the computer and is clear to the developer. I don't want to point to any of you right now because this is stupid, but basically just replace this and this with actual enums. That is the only bad thing here. Everything else is absolutely fine.
Here he appears to be storing a timeline of events in a flat one-dimensional array with random numbers as the indices in order to represent said event.
Which is exactly what you do in actual game development when you want to serialize your data so you can save it in one call to a serializer. That's my main issue here. Someone that doesn't understand why something is done is criticizing the entire thing because they read that this one is bad.
When it comes to the nested structure, though, tell me what you think is better. What Thor has here or what I have on screen?
Okay, so what you have on screen here is bad. So no, this is bad. I might consider something like this instead. And we are certain that we know what we are addressing. And not only that, when we read and write it, we just read and write two arrays. And those arrays contain simple data. We want all of our data to be serialized in the simplest way we can. This gets annoying and complicated very fast. This doesn't. Are cashier not able to be shared between shops? Can they not work in multiple places?
I don't even need to know how this game is designed to understand that whatever he's doing here is not optimal.
And this is exactly the type of thing someone that don't understand textbook game development. So this guy does half the thing in textbook game development because this is how you code games. Because trying to serialize something in a struct with thousands of fields is horrific compared to trying to serialize a simple array with integers and an enum that is key coded to the types of values that those integers should hold. Those are two completely different beasts. One of them is better and one of them is absolutely stupid. When you have this guy, which is absolutely stupid and is criticized by someone who doesn't understand game design, his criticism becomes dumber than this guy, which is why I'm so angry, because clowning on this guy is so easy. He is stupid, doubly so. And so many things you can actually show that he's using an integer when he should be using a false or true. Maybe he should make enumerations. The guy refuses to make any enumeration. He's worse than Yandere Dev in this term. He actually did something that is not stupid in this part. And this guy is clowning on this part, which is smart, because he thinks this entire thing is stupid. While this is stupid, this is smart, and this is stupid. This is intern behavior. I'll fix it for you. If we're doing it in main, okay, we'll do int main, and we decide to designate the character in here, well, we already have a perfect representation of the character, this, and because we don't want to change it after we set it, and we're setting it to a static value, well, we just do this. Oh, wow. So either we do this when we actually pass the variable as a, like we actually pass it as a constant parameter, so we know that this is a constant and we don't change it, or when we assign it and we assign it as a constant because we get the value here. You can save up all of this stupid amount of code. Even if it was 2 lines, it would still be a stupid amount of code because this code is stupid. So any amount of stupid code is a stupid amount of code. And basically we just have the enum and we have the const enum type value. Look how much better this is. It does all of this without this entire class, without this function call. Just write simple code.